going on, football fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with a Week 14 preview for DFS and for props this weekend. We'll go through some of my top stacks of the week to help you guys find a few game environments to attack for those large field contests, and then afterwards we'll go through a few props over there on Prize Picks and Underdog Fantasy that I'll be playing for some of my prop exposure here for Sunday. Got a lot to go through. Let's go ahead. It started off with a look at the DFS side of things. Rather than our typical 3 stacks, well, we've got a little bonus one this week because our first game we'll go through here is just too good to pass up, and that's from both sides of the football. We've got the Josh Allen Bills going against Patrick Mahomes in those Kansas City Chiefs, and pretty much every time they play, it ends up being one for the ages, right? We know all about that overtime matchup that changed the roles of football. Last time out, an extremely competitive matchup as well, and though both teams have been maybe a little bit disappointing this year, that's only because of the lofty expectations that we have for both. So when I saw just 6% ownership on an Allen, just 7.7% projected ownership on somebody like Patrick Mahomes, got me interested in this game environment. It got a 48.5 point total, so they're expecting there to be quite a bit of scoring this time around. And again, that's despite them being maybe a little bit lackluster here in 2023. A few things to note about this is that, 7.7%, both of those aren't low ownership numbers, but when we take a look at some of the wide receivers or running backs that you can mix into the fold here is where you're going to find a lot of that differentiation. So let's go ahead and just hop on in. In terms of your running backs, we do have Isaiah Pacheco out of this game. So you have CEH down here at $4,200, who's getting some attention, but it also gives you plenty of salary relief, right? When we're taking an elite level stack like a Chiefs-Bills game here, we're going to have to be able to save salary at some point. So at defense, right, you could punt there, get all of the salary that you need, or even just mixing in a CEH down there at a 2.6x points per dollar. One of the better value plays that we have on the slate, but does come in at a little bit of ownership. If you're looking for differentiation, right, it's a James Cook, right, 1.9%. At wide receiver, right, Stephon Diggs, not getting that much attention at 5.1%. You got a Gabe Davis that we can mix in, right, 1.2% owned. And all of those Kansas City wide receivers not named Travis Kelce or Rashee Rice are all low owned, right? So Rice, 17.2%, Travis Kelce, 14% owned up there. Everyone else is a leverage play. We go down here, you'll see we have ownership numbers of 1.5% on Justin Watson. Go down towards the bottom, 0.5% on Tony, 0.7% on MVS, and just 2% ownership on the Sky Moore. You mix in any of those players into your pool, and your chalk stack turns into one with a decent amount of leverage and probably a unique build as well. So this game, right, I thought was going to get a lot more attention than we're seeing at this point. And the fact that they're coming in pretty averagely owned makes them some of the best plays on the slate, in my opinion. So you can see I have both of them down as core plays. In terms of my top stacking options, number one's got to be Stephon Diggs because he's only 5% owned. Frankly, he could easily be 15, 20%, and I would still be buying. And then over here at tight end, Travis Kelce, right? If there's one consistent, reliable option out there for Kansas City, it's been Travis Kelce, right? Gets a bulk share of the targets, right? 30, 35% usage rate every single week. And that's not likely to change in this scenario. And for our next stack, right, 2 more typical scenarios we'll go ahead and point out. That top one, right, they're expensive. You're going to have to punt at some spot. These next 2, relatively cheap, right? So $6,400 Jared Goff is in a must-win game against the Chicago Bears out there. It's not the highest total game, but the last time these 2 people played, right, out there Thanksgiving, there was a ton of points scored. We very well might end up seeing that again. So a few reasons I like this Jared Goff stack. First off, it is extremely low owned. So you're going to have guys like Amon-Ra, right, that are getting some exposure out there, but whether it's both running backs for Detroit, which are both like sub 3% owned, whether it's the 1.6% ownership number that you're getting with their Jared Goff, it's really easy to get leverage to the field here. And frankly, when you have these divisional high scoring sort of matchups, they're the perfect type of spots to go out there and go for a shootout type of game script. So in terms of the running backs, I think that's a really good starting point because if you're looking for leverage, you got unlimited here, right? Jahmyr Gibbs is 4.6%. David Montgomery is only 2.2% owned. I mean, on most weeks, you're looking at like 15 to 20% on both of them. They have some of the higher usage rates on the entire NFL. And of course, Gibbs, productive out of the backfield. With Montgomery, you got somebody that's an absolute touchdown machine. So depending on the kind of script you're expecting, right, if Detroit is going to be playing from behind, maybe you like Jahmyr Gibbs because of that receiving upside. Whereas with David Montgomery, if they're playing from ahead, it's going to get even more usage out of the backfield. he probably benefits from a script where they're playing from ahead. So I like both of those running backs. There's a time and place to get to both of them. In terms of your wide receivers, right, Amon-Ra getting a little bit of attention, but it's not out of hand. Right? It's only 8.1% ownership. Go to tight end, you'll see Sam Laporta's only 2% over there. And if we go to some of the cheaper wide receivers, they're essentially unowned, right? So let's find them down there. We got Josh Reynolds, want to point out. Jameson Williams, right? 1.1 and 1% ownership apiece. And your buybacks, low owned as well, right? You've got a DJ Moore up here. What, 8.9% owned? That's your pretty much highest owned option out there for the Bears. Darnell Mooney's next to no ownership. And see what his actual ownership number is. Darnell Mooney's only at 2.3%. And then Cole Kmet, for example, I know he's 9.2% owned, but all of those guys on the Detroit Lions are giving you that leverage, right? It's not like you're getting all 3% owned players over here for the Bears, but there's enough of them to make your lineup unique. So especially with the other spots outside of your stack, right, you should be trying to use those to differentiate yourself. The Lions stack itself might be enough to do it, though. You might not even have to get that different with the other 4 or 5 spots in your lineup. So that's what I like about the Detroit stack, is unlike these other two, right, you're not having to worry about ownership for the other spots in your lineup. It's more so your stack that's going to get that done for you. And then the last stack we'll go through here is going to be Josh Dobbs against the Las Vegas Raiders. So Josh Dobbs, maybe not the best start last time out, right? Turned the ball over a lot, didn't show us that rushing upside that he had for the first month of him being a starter. But at $5,900 and a soft matchup against this Raiders secondary, I think it's a spot to buy low on him, right? A few weeks ago, he was relatively chalky. People were real excited about getting to the Pastronaut as his nickname has come to grow at this point. But at 3.22 points per dollar, that is one of the best, if not the best, quarterback play on the entire slate. And kind of like those top 2 stacks, he's getting some attention, right? He's 6.8% owned, but it's not nearly enough for the kind of upside he brings to the table. So Justin Jefferson being back is a huge reason why I think this is a week to buy low on him. He's only projecting for about 2 points per dollar, but Justin Jefferson, one of the highest ceilings of any player on the slate. So the fact that he's only 4.2% owned makes him extremely attractive. Guys like TJ Hawkinson are only 3.3% owned himself, so he's also, a piece of leverage you can get to. Alexander Mattison down here, you can see he's only 3.8%. You go to a Jordan Addison, who of course is going to take a huge, decrease in usage now that the number 1 wide receiver is back. He's only 1.1% owned, right? If you think that Justin Jefferson is perhaps a little bit limited in the Addison maybe takes over that number 1 role again, well, he's only 1.1% owned. So you're talking about a quarterback that's maybe getting some attention, but all of the guys that you can mix in with Joshua Dobbs are all coming in at low ownership numbers. So that's why I'm seeing myself getting there in a lot of my exposure. And in terms of your buybacks, there's plenty, right? There's some attention going to them, but you're going to get so different with some of the stacking options there that you're not going to have to worry about it, right? It's kind of similar to the last lineup where the Bears buybacks were getting some attention, but you didn't have to worry about it because of how low owned the guys are that you're mixing in on the Lions team. So Josh Jacobs, a little bit chalky, right? Devontae Adams, another relatively chalky option you can use as a buyback. Adams only 6%, so it's really not all that bad. Just mix in some of those lower owned plays, you get the job done for your lineups, and you've got a stack that is at a high upside, relatively high total game. I have to say, right, this Las Vegas Vikings game has a little bit of a lower total than some of the other games that we're targeting, but I think it has that ceiling for a shootout, right? You have 2 teams that aren't the best on the defensive side that have shown spurts of being productive on offense. That's the kind of scenario that I'm looking to attack, especially when you're considering the game theory perspective. Now let's talk some props. So over here on Underdog Fantasy, 3 props that are catching my eye. So first off, the 3x payouts over here on Underdog give you a 6-out payout, so a little bit better than what you get on Prize Picks. And 3 props that I think are quite a bit of value you can take. So first off, this Nico Collins under at 5.5 receptions. He's going against a Jets team, which is one of the better against a passing attack in the entire NFL. But further than that, you've got Sauce Gardner, who's probably going to be locking down Nico Collins for a lot of tomorrow's game. And on top of that, pretty shitty weather. You've got rain being forecasted for at least spurts during the game, 15 to 20 mile an hour wind gusts, which likely leads us to more of a rushing heavy game. So the weather on top of Sauce Gardner, on top of the fact that you have an inflated projection here on a Nico Collins, all have me taking an under on his receptions prop. Next up, we got a game that's in perfect weather, right? In a dome over there in Atlanta. You got Younghoe Koo over 1.5 field goals made. He's one of the most accurate kickers in the league. In fact, in terms of league history, the most accurate kicker in the entire NFL, right? Regardless of the era. And on top of that, is playing in perfect conditions in a dome against a defense which is one of the better red zone stuffers in all of the NFL. So with Desmond Ridder, pretty inefficient quarterback going out there, a solid defense, also the most accurate kicker out there, they've got pretty much everything working for you. And if you take a look at the sportsbook odds, he's over there at -135 for the over 1.5. So once again, kind of considering the weather as a little added bonus there, made me go out there and get some attention, a little bit of exposure to Younghoe Koo. Then the last prop we're taking is an under on David Montgomery rushes. And while Montgomery has been a workhorse this year against a really tough Bears front seven, I don't expect the Lions to maybe run the ball as much as they have in the past. Now, he's definitely capable of scoring touchdowns. We know he's been an extremely efficient runner here in 2023. With Gibbs starting to get more usage, he, of course, has seen over 10 rushes 4 of the last 5 games. Part of that was with Montgomery out, so obviously you can kind of throw those out, but even with Montgomery in the fold, you've seen him with games of like 12 and 14 carries, so I do think that he's earned some of that usage, and that is just going to come to a detriment for the usage out there for Montgomery. So with the tough matchup, with the fact that the Bears have looked a lot better over the last month, perhaps this is a little bit less of a blowout than it otherwise would have been otherwise. And you see Montgomery getting a few less touches. So the reason why I took this 3-man over here in Underdog is, of course, they give you a 6-out payout as opposed to the 5x on Prize Picks. So if you're going to enter any 3-leg cards, you probably want to focus them over here on this side. And now for our Prize Picks exposure, where we're going to be taking a 2-man over here on Prize Picks. So we've got 2 props from the same game. We've got an under on Cooper Kupp receiving yards and an under on Zay Flowers receiving yards. And kind of like we had in that Texans versus Jets game, you're going to have a pretty shitty weather. You have high winds being forecasted in that 15 to 20 mile an hour range. And while the weather forecast in terms of precipitation has gone a little bit better over the last 24 hours, they're still calling for pockets of rain to come through. So the weather perspective is going to be hurting both of the passing offenses, whether it's the downfield throws because of the wind, or even just from holding onto the football with how wet it is. But the reason why I really like these two is not all weather based. It also has to do with how they've been playing of late. And I'm never a last 5 man. You hardly ever, right? Hear me talking about a player's last 5 performance, but Cooper Kupp has not looked like himself of late. And I mean, if you look at the game log here, right, he's gone over this projection once and it was by 0.5 yards. Puka Nacua has seen a huge uptick in usage over that time, but Cooper Kupp looks a little bit washed out there, right? He got re-injured during the season. It definitely looks to be hampering him quite a bit, and he's still seen targets over that stretch. He just has not turned it into much production. He's had drops over it. He's not had that yards after catch that he's known for, one of the more agile players in the entire league. So I really like this under, especially when you consider the weather and the fact that the Baltimore defense is one of the best in the entire NFL. I frankly don't understand this line at all. So I took an under on Cooper Kupp, and on the other side of the game, Zay Flowers, promising young talent, right? Especially early in the year, was posting a ton of yardage week in and week out. A lot of that was because of injuries to the rest of the team. I think something that people coincidentally just kind of forget, right, about that stretch for the Baltimore Ravens. OBJ wasn't close to healthy then. Bateman was out for quite a few of those games. I think even Mark Andrews was a little bit, dinged up to begin the year. So Zay Flowers, still great talent, right? I think in the future is going to start to post crazy fantasy numbers out there with Lamar. Look at this stretch of late, right? He's gone over this projection once. He's got a, semi-tough matchup against the Rams. It's not the worst matchup in the entire NFL, but a lot more mouths to feed on that offense, and he's covered this line once. And now we have all that wind, all that weather that's going to potentially make this a little bit of a slogfest. So first off, the correlation between the two is definitely there, right? If the weather is worse than what they're projecting for, these two could easily soar under on that alone. But especially considering some of the game logs, I think there's a lot of value on these two as well. So there was a Nico Collins prop over here that I ended up taking at 70.5. That was bumped down to 67.5. So probably best to stick to these two over here on Prize Picks at this point, and leave the 3-mans over there for Underdog where you can get that 6x payout. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the Week 14 preview. Smash that like button on the way out of here if you found this video useful, and make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of the content in the future. For all the behind the scenes content, including all of my projection sheets, uncensored with the entire player pool, check out my Patreon down below. And for all my different prop content that I'm posting, if you want to know every slip I'm entering, every prop I'm going with over there on Underdog Prize Picks and on Hard Rock Bet, well, make sure to check out the Patreon page. I'm posting it all in there, all my analysis before things end up getting bumped. So if anything got bumped on props there, just know that's kind of inevitable, right? When there's a lot of value out there, you're going to see these lines adjust to it, and the best place to get all of that before any of that line movement is over there on the Patreon. And of course, to get all the exposure I'm getting to, right? Not just a slip or two on each site. Make sure to check it out there too. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for all the support here on the channel. Best of luck with all those lineups, all those prop slips that you're going with this week. And let's go out there and find our name towards the top of some of those GPPs.